right, I'm back here with Mark, and we're going to continue talking through the goodness of God. And where we've been for the past couple weeks is just looking at Israelite history and seeing people who have desires for the goodness of God, but because of the sinful flesh that we all live in day to day, they're unable to usher in the promises and the complete work that God has in mind and prepared for them. So the last couple weeks we looked at Noah and Abraham and Joseph and just kind of looked at ways in which they determined for themselves what was good for them to do, what was right for them to do, what was going to usher in the promises of God. But over and over they fell, with Joseph kind of being an outlier in that group. So this week I think we're going to turn our attention toward Moses and Joshua as we just kind of continue through that Israelite story and the ways in which they make decisions that I think we're supposed to wrestle with and try to come to some sort of conclusion of are people following the will of God, or are they pursuing their own will and their own desires?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. You know, it seems to me that in all of this, where people have trouble following the desires of God, it is really odd, paradoxical, that what people really, I think, deeply inside want is what God has for them, even though they pursue it in self-centered and foolish and narrow ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of Abraham and Sarah. God had promised them a child that would lead to a great nation that would bless all other nations. And so instead of just trusting and being patient and letting God bring about his promise, they take it into their own hands and try to force it.
Yeah.
And it unravels, some of God's goodness. Not that it not saying it ruins or in some way
thwarts or God's purpose.
Yeah, but you can see where when they live by their own rules and by their own will, it is detrimental to their lives and the lives of those around them.
Uh-huh.
God's goodness stays the same.
Yes.
Yes. But we can sometimes reject his way and go about it our own way, which never turns out well for humans.
Right. God's wisdom isn't involved in those cases when we take a charge and seek our narrow-minded ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to talk today about some people who it seems like they're doing that exact thing you're talking about. So we're going to start in Joshua chapter 1. And right here is kind of the overlap of Moses dying, Moses's his service to God coming to an end, and Joshua stepping in Moses's place to be the leader of God's people. And so at the beginning of Joshua, they're getting ready to enter this promised land, another promise that God's made for them, for his people, that he's going to give them the good thing, the thing that they really desire, that he's promised to give them. He says, get ready. We're getting ready to go into the land. Prepare yourselves. Meditate on my words. Soak in my word so that it reworks the ways that you think and the ways that you imagine how God can work in your life. And then, as you saturate your mind in his words, speak those words into the lives of others so that they can have their way of thinking and their imagination reworked by the words of God. Don't let those words depart from your lips. Be strong and courageous. We're going into the land. Prepare.
And these are the second generation, aren't they? They aren't the initial group that were saved through the Red Sea, those people were unfaithful and unrighteous and could not trust fully in God or have the patience that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the people. These are the people that were born and raised in the wilderness and did not experience the miracles that their fathers
Mm-hmm.
and mothers had.
Yes. And that's so true for us too. We read these incredible works of God that were other people's experiences. And so what God is encouraging Joshua and the people to do in the wilderness, the people who grew up, and what they know is wilderness wandering.
Mm-hmm.
He's encouraging them and encouraging us to pull these stories off of the page and live in them like it's your story. Let God's story be your story so that it governs the way you think, the way that you talk, where you go.
I love that. I think that's the whole purpose of us being given this. God's provided these stories so that we can apply it to our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of what God tells Joshua in Joshua 1, verses 1 through 9. So then in verse 10, Joshua turns his attention to the leaders of all the tribes, the leaders of the people. And he tells them, pass through the midst of the camp and command all the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. And so you can kind of see the chain of command. God tells Joshua, Joshua tells the leaders and the officers of the people, and the officers and leaders of the people are supposed to go tell everybody, get ready. Within 3 days, we're going to cross the Jordan and take possession of the land God is giving us. And then, in verse 12, Joshua turns his attention to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And so right there, we have to wonder, why is he turning his attention to this group of 2.5 tribes? Why is Joshua focusing on this group when he says what follows? He says, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. So to get the full backstory, which is important in this section, we need to go to Numbers 32.
It almost sounds like these people had separated themselves from the other tribes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he's going to them separately, it almost seems like they are isolated from the others. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of how Numbers 32 paints the picture. Numbers 32 says, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad, so the Reubenites and the Gadites, they had a great number of livestock, and they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben, they came to Moses and to Eleazar, the priest, and to all the chiefs of the congregation, and they said, the land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. They go on to say, if we found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. Well, this kind of rubs Moses the wrong way. And Moses says, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here? Why will you discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land the Lord's given them? Remember, your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, and they discouraged the heart of the people of Israel from going into the land the Lord had given them. And this kind of speaks to what you were saying about the second generation. The Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, surely none of the men who came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, none except Caleb and Joshua, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And then Moses goes on to say to these people who are asking for something outside of what God has prepared, what God's promised. And he says, behold, you've risen in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all this people. So it seems like Moses is going to say, no way.
Yeah.
Why would you settle for a land outside of what God's promised? This is what God has expressed as his desire for his people. So why would you not want to follow through? Why would you not want to wholly follow? I'm expecting Moses to say, no, I'm not going to agree to this arrangement. We're all going into the land as a united group of God's people.
Yeah.
Well, they come near to Moses and they say, we're going to build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we will take up arms, ready to go before the people of Israel until we've brought them to their place. Our little ones shall live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the people of Israel has gained his inheritance. For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan to the east. And so Moses says, okay, if you will do this, if you'll take up arms, if you'll go before the Lord and you pass over the Jordan until he's driven out all the enemies from before him and the land is subdued, back to Genesis 1, subdue the land, have dominion over it, you can return and be free of the obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you don't do so, if you don't keep your end of the bargain, you have sinned against the Lord, and you can be sure your sin will find you out. So build cities for your little ones, folds for your sheep, do what you've promised. And the people of Gad and the people of Reuben said to Moses, your servants will do as the Lord commands. Our little ones, our wives, our livestock, all of our cattle will remain there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will pass over, every man who is armed for war, before the Lord to battle, as my Lord orders. And so I think we're supposed to be sitting here like, is this okay? Should Moses have agreed to this concession?
Yeah. Interesting. Because the people there that want to separate, eventually, they're deciding, they're determining their own future, and it's not God's plan for them. So they're determining, even though they will support Israel in God's plan, they've decided to go their own way after that. And that's a mistake, I think. I think anytime you choose, even if something looks good, looks favorable to you, but God's will is for you to go a certain way, but you choose the way that appeals to you, I think that's not wise. Not wise at all. But it's interesting. It's interesting, and it sounds like perhaps God will support Israel in this battle, of course, since they are obeying and fulfilling His will. And it's almost like, do what you want to do after that. You're free of the obligation, which could also mean you're not going to be under the umbrella of God's blessing any longer if you do separate from us at a later time.
Yeah. And you could, I mean, I can understand why that would be. Like if they're saying, if God's saying, don't be afraid, don't be dismayed.
Mhm.
We're going to go into the land. It's going to be yours because God has promised. And they're like, oh, well, I have kids and
Yeah.
a livelihood and a wife, and I want to build them a fortified city because of the inhabitants of the land. Like, I don't trust your measure of protection. I need to set up my own.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of alluding back to Numbers 13, where the spies go into the land and they're intimidated by the inhabitants of the land. And so they give a false report, to about how good the land is,
Yeah.
and discourage everybody else from following through, from wholly following.
And Moses has told them this is what happened because of your fathers and what they did before.
Mm-hmm.
And you're wanting to follow the same path that they did.
Yes.
You know, it would make me leery if I were Moses. Would the heart of these people be in the battle
Mm-hmm.
with Israel?
Yeah, yeah. And it is kind of, it sounds like irony to me that, they're gonna go set up these fortified cities for their wives and their children and their livestock. And it's not that long afterwards that they're now called to go and fight with the rest of the Israelites. And so now they have to bid farewell to the things that they hold so precious.
Mm-hmm.
And they go into this 7-year conquest of Canaan. I just wonder how many even made it back to the thing that they so treasured.
Interesting idea and thought. Yeah, how many of them actually survived and were able to return? Now that is, I'd love to ask that in the end time, in the last day, and kind of know what happened to these people.
Yeah, I'm curious too, like what God thought about this.
Mm-hmm.
Because he clearly says, like, it's going to be a sin if you don't follow through with your commitment. And the way that Moses says, like, you're a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord of Israel. If it was such a sin against God, I don't know why Moses would say, I agree. Like, was that something Moses shouldn't have agreed? Like, the text never really tells us. It doesn't say. It doesn't really say. I think it's forcing us to try to put it in the categories that we need to. It's making us think about our life choices and how we repeat the same, even if it's not like clearly, explicitly sinful. If it's outside of what God said he wants for us or he desires for us, we probably shouldn't pursue that.
Yeah. But he's also concerned, about the spirit of the Israelites. Will they be discouraged from following through on God's plans if these people withdraw and say no? Like the spies came back with a negative report and don't do this. It could really hit the heart of the Israelites to where they're not trusting fully in God. So maybe Moses is concerned with fulfilling God's purpose faithfully, and then if they really wanted to back away after that, then that's their choice.
Mm-hmm. I think you can see this attitude play out in churches today, where God's called us to unite, to stick together, to love one another, to help each other. And then when things get uncomfortable or things aren't going as I desire, well, we just remove ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And how discouraging is that to our fellow brothers and sisters, to watch somebody remove themselves, to take themselves out of the circle, that God has established, at this place or at another church. And how it just causes people's heart to melt like it did to the rest of the tribes.
Yeah. It's in many cases, I would say that is a type of decision like these people were making to withdraw and not to follow through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Personal decision and based on whatever reason. But instead of working with the group for the glory of God.
Found the easy way, the
Yeah.
more comfortable,
Yeah.
more expedient,
Mm-hmm.
more desirable. Instead of being faithful and patient, whether it's to our brothers and sisters or God, let's just do what I want to do.
Yeah. Speaks a lot about patience,
Mm-hmm.
about faithfulness and patience.
It does. There's some other details I do want us to cover, because while this is taking us back to Numbers 13, they're intimidated by the inhabitants of the land. They want more protection than just the protection that God seems to be offering them. Back in Genesis 13, there's this scene. This is Genesis 13, verse 1. Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into Negeb. Now Abram was very rich in livestock. That sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
He was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold, and he journeyed on from Negeb as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place that he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord, and Lot, who went with him, also had flocks and herds and tents. So the land could not support them dwelling together, because their possessions were so great, they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we're kinsmen. Is not this whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, I'll go to the right. If you take the right hand, I'll go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, which would go on to be the promised land, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. So Abram is settling in the land that God's going to go on to say, look up, lift your eyes from the place that you are, look in every direction. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. That's where Abram goes, the land of promise. But Lot settles in this Jordan Valley among the cities of the valley, as far as Sodom and Gomorrah. And so what the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh are doing is settling in the same area, the Jordan Valley. And now they're going to reconstruct new fortified cities for their livestock, of course, and reconstruct these fortified cities in proximity to those wicked cities of old, Sodom and Gomorrah. So how do you think this is going to play out?
It sounds interesting, because we see parallels in the Bible. So I would predict that this isn't going to work well.
Yeah. Who would you predict will be the first tribes carried off into captivity and exile when Assyria comes in? It's these tribes that are in this valley. They are the first ones that are carried off into captivity. during the Assyrian invasion. Like you said, they're outside of the protection. They've settled for something less than what God said is best for them.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And they've separated themselves from God, really.
mhm. They have. From him and his people. You know, this land that God wants to rule over through them. They have something else in mind. And then they're going to put the blame on their wife, you know, kind of like Adam.
Yeah.
Put the blame on their livestock.
Yeah.
Yeah, the land might be fit for livestock, but it's not the land that God said is fit for his people. And so it doesn't matter how good the land looks, how expedient it is to your livelihood, how safe it is for your loved ones. It's outside of what God said is good.
Yeah.
And they're trying to determine what is going to be good, but it's outside what God has said is the good thing and is his desire for them.
Yeah. I just wonder what their mindset was to just desire separation. It's interesting because you know that they've been told to be faithful, to be trusting, along with the other tribes of Israel. And they have just not been enthusiastic about that, apparently.
Mm-hmm. And they get so close.
Oh,
yeah, they get so close.
Yeah.
The land is there. It's across the river. But they settle for less than.
Mm-hmm.
They settle for less than what God has said is best and what is really good. And so they settle in the worst way. They settle outside of what God is determined to be his promise and his place of goodness.
Yeah, I know. For some reason, this calls to mind a couple who the wife was converted to Christ and the husband wasn't, and he never cared to follow through spiritually with her, but he would talk about how good she was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he kind of admired her and her spirituality, but he
Would it reciprocate?
refrained and just wouldn't commit himself.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting that somebody would be like that.
Be that close.
Mm-hmm, that close.
You know? But not follow through, not see it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a stark warning, I think, for Christians today. I mean, we can be close, but because of impatience, because of faithlessness, it can dissuade us from inheriting the promises and settle for something, a life of convenience, a life of ease, a life that seems more appealing and more desirable and more safe, a life of less waiting and wondering.
A life where you're in control
Yes.
yourself. You are the determiner of your fate.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And so, I mean, the story still leaves us wanting, you know, like, and I think that's the point of all of this Israelite history is that we're still waiting. We're still waiting for the person whose name means Yahweh saves,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can be robed in his righteousness and stand faultless before the Lord. Because in him, that is what we're offered in Christ. That even when we do make wrong choices, when we do give in to sin, if we keep going back to our Lord and our Savior, like, we can stand faultless before the throne.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that Joshua or Moses or Abraham, even Joseph, as good as he was in the story, like, he could not offer that. Only one can offer that.
Right.
And it leaves us looking forward to the one who will be able to offer us the ability to stand faultless before the throne because we're clothed in his righteousness.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but I believe that what people really want deep, deep, deep down inside is spiritual love, peace, support, knowledge that we have our Creator within us and behind us, and just that knowledge that we're at rest in our souls.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's deeply what we really do want, even though we pursue our own answers that don't work out as well
Mm-hmm.
as what God's will.
Yeah. Yeah. And so once you carry the story forward, in Mark chapter 5, there's this scene where Jesus steps out of on the other side of the sea. He comes to the other side of the sea to the country of the Gerasenes or the Gadarenes. And so this scene where Jesus encounters this, to everyone else, not to Jesus, but to everyone else, this imposing, mighty, demon-possessed man that can break shackles and cannot be bound. And like it's happening in the land of the tribe of Gad. And it is now become not just a place for livestock, but it's become a place for the pigs, which is not all that appealing, especially to Jewish population.
Yeah.
And it is the people in that land who, when Jesus saves this demon-possessed man, they come to Jesus. They saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion. They saw him sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. The region is for pigs now. Of course, Jesus has removed the demons, and the demons went into the pigs, which ran off over a cliff, right, and died.
Yeah.
So Jesus is seen as an undesirable force, I guess.
Yeah.
To these people.
And he's cleaning out all the unclean things,
Mm-hmm.
not just the demons, but also the unclean livestock that is now, taken possession of the land. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it leaves the story. I mean, we're kind of flashing forward into Jesus. We're gonna get there in due time, but Joshua leaves us wanting, and you can even see how the land, the tribes of the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, how the land that they thought was desirable and would be the good thing, well, it doesn't really seem like it turned out to be all that good of a thing for them.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't live up to expectations, does it?
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting, very interesting how the future works out for these people, and how it could have been for them.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to ruminate on too, is like, how would this have been different if they had actually wholly followed, like Joshua and Caleb? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, no one does. You know, like,
We don't know if these people really participated in, spiritual matters with Israel after this, in the temple and so forth. Perhaps they're completely separated from God and His law and His plans and His purpose.
yeah, I mean, living outside of the promise, exposed to the temptations of worldly affairs. I mean, it starts with livestock, but who knows how far in the wrong direction pursuing worldly affairs takes you.
Yeah.
So we're still wanting, we're still lacking, we're still looking for the one who will come and drive out all the uncleanness and offer us his purity, his righteousness. And he is coming. He has come. And, in Joshua, he is coming in 2020, what is it, 2025 now?
Yeah.
He has come. Yeah.
Yeah. He has come.